She just keeps whining. It's actually quite ridiculous. Anyways, I was saying, the other cards are boring, and these cards are interesting. It's not only now do we have decks that are good, but they're also interesting or fun to play, so now people play a ton of it. Like, people love buffing their Tunnel Trog. They love dropping Malygos and killing stuff. Like, it just so happens that I think the decks that are most powerful right now also happen to be the most interesting, and that's why we're seeing such a disproportion on the ladder. Because it's not like their win rates are actually that ridiculously high. I mean, if you look at a VS data report, yeah, okay, 53% is pretty good compared to what it has been in the past, but I mean, it's not. You see one out of every 4 games, you see a Shaman. I mean, there's obviously the argument that you can counter Shaman. People don't think you can. I think you can with Dragon Warrior. But regardless, like, is it that big of a deal that some classes are bad and some classes are good? Last year, Shaman was bad. Now Shaman's good. Is it a problem that you can't play every class at the same time? Think about how hard it is to design a game when you only have so many people. And this isn't like a defend Blizzard rant. This is just the reality of the situation. Is you have so many fucking hours being put into Hearthstone. So many hours being put into Hearthstone. Compared to a game like Magic the Gathering. And you're given time to put Magic the Gathering down. I think this is also another important distinction to make. An in-person card game, you prep for the tournament before the tournament, and most of the development is done before major tournaments. And then after the major tournaments are over, the development slows down. After the tournament's over, people go home. They take time off. They reevaluate the situation. In Hearthstone, you never take time off. You just queue up another game. You go to another tournament. You queue up another game. You prep for another tournament. You're never taking a break. And I also think that this traps people into thinking that the meta is more stale than it is because they play the same deck so often, they see the same deck so often, they don't try new things. An example of that would be this weekend where at PGL, the G2 players brought what was considered by the casters, or by Lothar at least, anti-aggro, anti-shaman lineup, and that's why you saw the rogue have Harrison in it instead of Auctioneer. Now, what's interesting to me is that they said that the PGL format was able to allow this, which just gets back to my culture point. That they're claiming things about the format that just logically aren't true. That strategy is better in a Conquest ban 1 scenario, but you don't see anybody using it. Now, some people would argue that's because it's not a real strategy and it's terrible and that's ridiculous, and like any concept of that is just insane, and you can't actually counter Shaman, what have you. And that may be true, but it's interesting that when all of a sudden we switch the rules, that people decided that they were going to try something new. They could have tried that in Conquest, but they didn't want to. Now, I'm saying this because it's a mindset. It's a literal mindset, or a logical trap where they thought that they couldn't do this in this other format, but when all of a sudden there were new rules opened up to them, they decided, let's try new things. And they tried this, and apparently they decided it worked since they played it in the tournament. The point being that people definitely pigeonhole themselves into thinking that everything's figured out because of the hours put in, or that these things aren't available to them because of how a certain format works or how it operates, that they're being limited somehow by constraints that don't even actually exist. Now, moving more in depth into the format differences, because we've seen Batstone this week. It did very well. Batstone did very well. I'm very happy with that and what Firebat did for the community. I think it's important to really think about why the event was so successful, though. Was it just because it was an alternate format, or was it because Firebat marketed the event very fucking well? I mean, we're talking about timing, we're talking about the little player gifts, everything. all of it was done extremely well. He marketed the event very well. So now you have to really start looking at, well, were they watching because it's something new and different, or were they watching because it was advertised properly? And PGL had significantly less viewers than Batstone, despite having a different format. I think Batstone is a little dangerous in that it gave people who watched this idea of a format that could be. When in reality, what we had was there's nothing to take away from this type of tournament where players are just playing for fun and they're just having fun. There's no prize pool. There's no incentives. It's not like these players prepped for weeks to get to the point where they were at. No one even knows if those are the best decks in the format. I heard some people saying that, yeah, of course JJ won. He was boring and brought aggro decks. Well, that just goes to show me that that format with all those card bans ends up being an aggro fest, which I don't think it does, or I don't think the current format we're in is that much of an aggro fest either. But just the idea that because the event had no incentivization, the players didn't define the meta. They didn't find out the meta. You need weeks to find out a meta. You need multiple Batstone tournaments to find out a meta. Do you know what players did to decide what decks they played in Batstone? They said, what's gone? Oh, Murloc Paladin didn't lose anything. That seems like a great deck. Murloc Paladin is probably the deck to beat. Yeah, let's try to beat Murloc Paladin, or let's play Murloc Paladin. That's all that happened. And people are like, oh, you take all those cards out, Murloc Paladin's good. Well, there's some people who think that Murloc Paladin's really good right now. And then we see Murloc Paladin lose. And you have people casting the game. Like Firebat and Zelay. Nothing against them. But they're saying things like, man, everyone seems to think that Murloc Paladin's the best deck, but keeps on losing. And Zelay has to keep reminding Firebat. I mean, you know they built their decks to beat this. It's important to keep all this in context because it shows how we went from a meta that no one likes, we took cards from it, and got a point in the meta, a minuscule point in that meta that doesn't define the whole picture, and then we had a misrepresentation of it. To illustrate my point even further, Firebat, for instance, said that he doesn't understand why everyone's banning Mage. Mage is 1 and 2. And everyone in the chat is like, lol, ban Mage. Why not play Shaman? Well, a lot of the players I talked to who participated in the tournament definitely thought Temper Mage was the best. I helped Osaka prep. I thought about it a decent amount. I also thought Temper Mage was the best deck. And a 3-game sample size is basically next to nothing. But all of a sudden, everyone watching is thinking like, oh, like Temper Mage they thought it'd be good, but it's not even good because the meta shifted for some reason, and you know the deck's not good because it went 1 and 2. Small sample sizes leading to false realities. This brings me to the reality, which is that I think because of how much Hearthstone is played and how much it's consumed, outside of just spitting out an insane number of cards and just changing all the time, you will always get to the point where people are unhappy. And even when it comes to changes, people always want to go one more step further. Now, to illustrate my point about people going one step further, I'm going to bring up this picture here. This is of the PGL format, which people said that they loved. The format was 9 deck, 6 ban, including self-bans and opponent bans, and then you pick 3 of your 4 remaining classes after the bans are done. Okay. RDU says, even though I prepped, I underestimated Druid. Okay. Here's the point I want to make. I'm not calling anyone out, just illustrating how the culture works and how people's mind works in response to these types of things. We needed 2 bans in first round of the pick ban phase, and it would have been a great tourney. There's another thing under here. I'm not going to go into this, but I do like showing you everything so it's not taken out of context. Now, this is just to illustrate the point that this format was very innovative in terms of the fact that it's never happened before. Ever. Someone still wanted one more ban. Do you know why I lost? I couldn't ban Druid, man. I can only ban Shaman. I needed more bans. Yeah, they banned Yogg. And they banned Tuskar, but I still lost to that Inner Fire Priest. Lucky guy. He had to draw Inner Fire at the right time. He had to get the double the life card with the card that gives it life. It's ridiculous, man. Obviously, that's a bit of a hyperbole. But the point being is, where do you draw the line? When do you start banning cards? When do you stop adding bans? When do you stop manipulating the format? And the reason why it's important that you look at when you need to stop manipulating the format is because every time you change something about the format, it gets further away from the ladder. Interestingly enough, StrifeCrow had a recent video on YouTube where he talked about Hearthstone, and one of the points that he brought up was that the experience is too far from the ladder. That what tournament players are doing and what the normal player of Hearthstone doing are two very different things. Now, I've been saying this for a while, but it goes to show that other people are also coming to this conclusion, so there might be something there to look into. Now, in terms of a format so extensive as the PGL, where you have 9 decks and you have 6 self bans or whatever, or 6 bans, or 5 bans or whatever, you know, it's important to realize that we're getting further away, not only from the ladder, but from decks that are streamlined and decks that are good. Like I've been saying, thousands of games, that aggro shaman, we have an aggro shaman list, it's beautiful, it's perfect, it's great. It's banned. Druid, thousands of games, beautiful, it's perfect, it's great, it's banned. Now all of a sudden we have decks that we probably haven't tested very extensively, other people haven't tested very extensively, we don't really have a reason to test them very extensively because we're only going to one tournament. Like, yeah, we want to win this tournament, so we're going to test it some, but, you know, that leads to a tournament where people don't know what to expect. People haven't played the games a bunch of times. It increases the skill of interacting for the first time with things, but does it really increase the skill overall? It increases the skill maybe in the pick ban phase, which, I mean, I would argue it's not as complicated as people think. But all of a sudden, now we're watching Priest play Priest or this play this. So now you just have 2 weak decks in terms of they're not as good as Shaman if they were built perfectly, but they're not even built perfectly. And this is where I'm going to really get into the rant. This is nothing against Crip or what he's doing. This is where the what my idea of perceptions of false reality come into play.